So before I introduce Carel, I think we need also to consider that as a challenge for you, Carel. Next time when she presents, we need CSIR South Africa as well, with a link to refer to what we are doing in the DLT research group. Thank you so much. Okay, let's move to the second presentation. We'll open the floor for a question after the second presentation for the both speakers. So the second speaker will be Carel Jager. He's the research group leader for the distributed ledger technology and blockchain. Carel, thank you.
So last night I attended a gala dinner with some of the CSIR stakeholders, and Professor Tokozani, which is the CSIR board, actually re-emphasized things that our CEO have said many times, and that is that we should focus more on the industry. So even though open source is good, and we do try, one of our mandates is to support smaller industries in South Africa, we also have to make money. So that's really one of the things that we focus on heavily, is how do we commercialize this technology. What Brunel said is very, very noble. But I think that's where we probably disagree the most. So she gave a very, very good intro to what is a metaverse, what it stands for. And to me, the only thing I can add to that is that the metaverse needs to be permissionless. It needs to be like the internet. The internet gave us the first taste of what permissionless technology is. Anyone in the world can innovate on the internet. You don't have to go through an application process. You can be partly anonymous if you do that. That's quite amazing. There's no discrimination. The internet doesn't care who you are, where you are from. You're free to code. You're free to build something and launch it in the world. And the metaverse really, I see it playing out in the same way, as being this space where anyone in the world can innovate. And then there's a lot of money flowing into this concept. We see this in mainstream media all the time. Billions of rands. I think Metaverse or Facebook, actually, Meta, the platform, was in the news recently for pouring in something like $15 billion into the space for the last year only. And not having much to show for it, but they're doubling on their bet. They say they're not going to reduce that budget, and they're focusing mainly on gaming, remote work, social interaction. And I think if you sum all the budgets up, it's probably like exceeds $100 billion a year that's currently flowing into this space. But something that I really don't pick up, and that's going to be about what my talk is about today, is where does the commerce part fit in? I don't see that. I don't see that from these companies. I don't see them focusing on that, and I think it's a big blind spot for them. So that's who's building, who's buying. There's two big companies in South Africa that's invested in land in the metaverse. That's MTN and Nedbank. Both of them paid several millions of rands for a piece of land in the metaverse. So what does that actually mean? Well, so why do they invest in the metaverse? They do go out on the assumption that the metaverse would become a place where people spend their time, and you know that shows quite a big shift in client behavior. It's almost like a mall or a cinema. You know, if you think about whether you can have an early presence, maybe in something like Menlyn Mall, maybe you were able to buy a piece of real estate in there. You know, that would make commercial sense to get that early presence. And it has a lot of operational benefits if you do have an office inside the metaverse. There's no physical limits on clients because you don't have a physical space that the people need to fit in. There's no infrastructure maintenance on that, no civil maintenance. It's open 24/7 and it's borderless. This is quite big. And it needs to remain this way. It needs to be borderless. And if you think about commerce, you know, commerce really creates geographical borders. Like, it's very difficult. Imagine you going into an online shop that's maybe hosted in Kenya. You want to buy something from Kenya, but you have a credit card that has South African rands on that. How are you going to convert that to Kenyan shillings? You can maybe do that through the banking system, provided the banks are open, so it's not weekends or after 8 in the evening. And you're going to pay a hell of a lot of fees to convert those South African rands to Kenyan shillings. You know, so it really needs to be borderless for it to work effectively, and that includes the commerce part to a large extent. So we at the CSIR, we go out with the belief that commerce will be as popular in the virtual world as it is in the physical world. Humans have a need for change, for trade. They want to engage in commerce all the time. and that will not change when we start spending a lot of time in the virtual world. So we set out to design a metaverse. There's two groups that's involved in that. It's us, the DLT group, and then there's the extended reality and virtual reality group as well. They're building the space, and where we interface is really where we think that the most commerce will happen inside the metaverse, and that's obviously social media, event organizing, certifications, real estate. If you do, for instance, host a occupational health and safety event inside the metaverse as a company, then obviously there won't be any commerce necessarily. So we're building tools and infrastructure to enable this layer of commerce as a turnkey solution, as a modular solution. And that includes payments rails, NFTs, self-sovereign identity, and a non-custodial wallet. And I'll unpack all four of these just now. And there's the picture that was also in Brunel's presentation. So we're also focusing on making these things interoperable. So if you have money in the metaverse, you'd likely spend that money in the real world as well. So you want to take your money out of the metaverse, you're going to buy something on Takealot, you must be able to do that as well. So it must be fully interoperable with not only the real world, but in other modules inside the metaverse and on social media and Web 2 and Web 1 and all the web numbers as well. So first of all, payment rails. So the payment rails that we conduct, rails, by the way, is a financial term. It just means that an infrastructure layer which enables the movement of money. So we're building payment rails that can conduct per second micropayment subscriptions. So we believe that none of the payments that happens in the metaverse will happen on a bulk payment. So you won't pay for something, you won't buy a ticket to a concert necessarily for the entire 3 hours of the concert duration. You'll go into the concert, you pay per second while you're in there, and when you go out, the payment stops. So money flowing like information. We used to download information, and when we consume it, we hoard it on our hard drives. And maybe like a movie or an MP3 or something like that. We'll hoard it on our hard drives, and then, if you had a terabyte or whatever, a large amount of information, then you consume that with time. So we believe that, but today, by the way, that doesn't work like that anymore. We stream our movies, we stream our music, we even stream our documents these days. It's all on the cloud. You don't have documents on your hard drive anymore. So we believe that money is going to flow in exactly the same way as information flows today. It's going to flow on a per second, per demand basis, micropayments. You'll pay insurance from the moment you switch your car on to the moment you switch your car off on a per second basis, depending on your driving patterns. So, that's just one example. So traditional payment rails cannot process this. You cannot take your credit card and tap it every second while you watching a show, right? That is impossible. It just cannot handle those volumes. There's only one protocol currently that can handle that, and that is the Bitcoin Lightning Network. So we're using the Bitcoin Lightning Network as a rail to move not only Bitcoin, but also South African rands, Kenyan shillings, US dollars, whatever the fiat currency you can think of, can also be moved, and completely the Bitcoin Lightning Network as a rail, as an infrastructure layer, can be completely abstracted from the user if that is necessary. The next one is non-fungible tokens, or NFTs. For those of you who've heard it, you probably think it's a scam. There's a lot of hype, and rightfully so, because it's a completely overhyped technology. But we're using NFTs and building real-world utility into that through a permissions layer. So for instance, an NFT representing a token, providing you permission to do something. That token can be a ticket to a concert, for instance. If you don't want to use the Lightning Network and pay per second, you actually want to sell tickets, then so be it. A certification, for example, or a credential. But an NFT as a credential is not always optimal, because an NFT is always interoperable. So I can get a NFT, let me give you an example. So if I get an NFT as a university degree, then I can always sell that NFT. That's one of the characteristics, one of the main characteristics of an NFT. You can trade it, you can sell it, you can give it away. It has value. You can trade it on there are many different marketplaces. There's hundreds of them. So, that wouldn't work if I was able to sell my university degree and now someone else is the owner of that. So to solve that, we use SSI, self-sovereign identity, which is a new way of treating credentials, which you are still the owner, just like you are the rightful owner of an NFT. Cryptographically, mathematically proven that you are the owner. we can do the same through SSI, but those credentials are obviously not tradable. They are attached to your identity. So that's the next layer, or the next function that we're building. The next module is probably the right word. So an NFT, although it can act as a credential, but only if the credential is independent of a holder's identity. That's when an NFT is valuable. Otherwise, we use SSI. And SSI credentials are obviously sensitive to user identity. Those are certifications, an ID number, medical data, for instance. You know, medical data is useless if you can sell it. A credit record or an insurance claim or anything like that. And then lastly, everything comes together in a non-custodial wallet. And this is where I do agree with Pernell. So a non-custodial wallet is the user interface, which contains the payments infrastructure, the NFT minting, trading, management dashboard, and your decentralized identity and everything else that goes with SSI. We're building it according to Web3 principles, so a non-custodial wallet means that you are the owner of that wallet. So whatever assets are inside that wallet, the NFTs, the money, the SSI credentials, it lives on your device physically. If you lose your device, your money's gone. There's no way for us to recover it. We don't have authority as a centralized service, okay? And that goes together with the semantic web and a stateless web, which Pernell referred to, which means you come to a service, like for instance, you come to Facebook, you bring all your pictures and your name and your identity and your information with it, you interact with Facebook, you leave, Facebook keeps none of that, right? So Facebook can't work like that. It's impossible. But we're building the architecture where this is actually possible. So you stay in control of your own data, but that comes with consequences. Because if you lose your device, you lose your money. And now that's a really difficult problem to solve. Okay, we're kind of looking into that, but that's not been solved by anyone around the world. That's a custody problem. There's ideas, there's some interesting research taking place, but about social recovery and all of those kind of things. But that's an incredibly difficult problem that we'll solve maybe in future. So we're building all of this in a very modular fashion. So we have the payments infrastructure, we have the NFTs, we have the SSI. This all goes into the non-custodial wallet. And then the Metaverse is basically just one thing that we can plug it into, one application. Because all of this together creates an economic layer on top of the internet. Really, that's what it's about. And the Metaverse, it will fit in perfectly with that. But it can also plug into IoT devices. If you want your IoT device to manage money, to make payments, to have an identity, it can also fit into it. You can enable different web monetization techniques with this as an alternative to ad-based revenue generators that we are so used to. You know, you go to a news website, you just see a bunch of ads. That's how you pay for the article. But there's different ways in which you can monetize that web. You know, you don't have to necessarily see ads. Why don't you pay per second? We're enabling that through these modules. So if it takes you 15 seconds to read an article, instead of watching a bunch of ads, why don't you just pay 1 cent and a second, 15 seconds, then you barely feel it. It's a different way of monetizing the web. Then anything to do with online commerce, banking, insurance, point of sale devices in the real world, or even document provenance. And there's a whole lot more that we can use these modules and plug them into that. The first application, obviously, the one that we focus on heavily the most now, is the Metaverse itself. That's it. Thank you.
Freddie McGarry from FabCam. Quick question. How have you thought about the tax implication of this wallet that you're putting together and payment system?
Yeah,
and where would it be payable, in South Africa or which country?
Oh, that's a really good question, and also a tough one. So, I think that it is perfectly possible to enforce tax compliance and compliance to many other of the financial regulations that we have in South Africa. But to really enforce that and enforce compliance to that effectively, the regulator needs some tools. I mean, the regulator is really currently not in the position to enforce any of the financial regulations when it comes to this type of technology. And that was all about I really dug deep into that yesterday during my talk, because that's the other thing that we heavily focus on, is actually building these tools, software for the regulator in order to unravel this technology. And when they do have the right tools, then it's a different playing field, because then you can actually do a lot more with this technology, enforce a lot more compliance with this technology if you have the right tools than you can with traditional finance. So, you can have automated tax returns and stuff like that, tax collections through the transactions and stuff. So yeah, that is also...
Can I add to that?
Yes.
So I think with the metaverse, it goes the other way as well. How do we ensure that that tax is properly spent? So I think the libertarian ideals is that you don't pay tax. Tax is theft. Tax is not theft. Corruption is theft. So how do we force, through solidarity, through openness, and that's possible, and that's scary, if that's where your bankrolling comes from. So it goes both ways, and it's possible. And that, to me, is what a digital union or a digital nation it means. Not something where I abstract into the big world, but where I can force you to govern properly.
I would also like to add to that point about tax in a blockchain environment. I think a good way to compare, a good comparison to make is to compare like cryptocurrencies to hard cash, like money. The same way, if you lose your wallet, you lose all your money, your hard cash. But then the comparison also holds to tax compliance. If you, like the tax regulators needed tools of accountability and accounting to be able to tax hard cash, and those tools need to be developed in blockchain environments as well for that kind of tax compliance, which opens up another sphere of opportunity, allowing for more development. So, yeah.
Any question?
There's one there.
Hi there. Thanks for your talks, both of you. I just wanted to find out if you could just discuss a bit more what you understand to be the shortfalls of blockchain, that you just kind of mentioned now, considering that that does seem to be the more popular technology that's being developed right now, and just, I think yesterday there was a talk on using blockchain technology in helping develop the manufacturing industry in this country. And so I'm just curious to hear more about why you consider blockchain not to be the savior it might seem to be.
So I can't understand why my friends and colleagues and associates, and they range from socialists to libertarians to anarchists to, not one of them think that it's a good idea. And they're not against it. They're just like, but why? Because everything that exists can do it easier, smoother. And so the one talk that is not in this talk, I can put it on my blog, is Ruben Verboog's talk on what is blockchain actually good for. And he does have use cases for it, but there's many, many use cases that it's not good for. And I absolutely agree with Carel that all of these friends are not in commerce. And I don't understand, are they missing something? Are we missing something? So I'm absolutely okay with Carel convincing me that it may be useful in the commerce space. But it just feels like there's better, cheaper, lighter, applications like SafeNet. SafeNet seems to be the one that you fall back on. I'm not in a position to explain it properly. I don't understand why I'm not getting more feedback from people and why people aren't adopting SafeNet more. And I think it's because geeks like us don't market it well enough. It's a continual learning curve. It just seems like there's cheaper things out there.
Yeah. I think the debate is quite open for blockchain use cases for anything that's not related to finance. But there's no debate when it comes to finance. Like, it's a no-brainer. If you can show me a way to move money, one transaction every second, microtransaction every second, across border, 24/7, settled immediately for free. With any other method than blockchain, then I'm all ears, but I don't think that exists. Yeah.
Can I add one more short thing? So I started this work, and I think I met Carel somewhere in the middle of this COVID thing, and people were predicted to starve to death because the people in the US, like Nigerian people in the US, couldn't send money home because Western Union decided because there's one or two more money launderers, they're not going to serve anyone from Nigeria. And now, what do? you're dead. So blockchain rails became a lifesaver. So I'm absolutely willing to concede that there are use cases. But what I do want to say is that I don't think technology can solve social problems. And so I'm absolutely fine with using a technology, but don't use it blindly. The fact that we can't take money over is not the problem of technology, it's the social problem. And if we don't address those two together, you're just taking all your problems and co-opting it into the challenges that we do have.
Thank you.
I think just to close this chapter, I really fully understand her frustration, because even in the center, they approach us, or we hear a lot of use cases where the client want to use blockchain, or we know about certain group doing blockchain, and when we look at it, but why you are using really blockchain there? And really I understand this frustration. It's just need to be careful. We are not at the end of the day looking for technology. We are looking for solution. And the how aspect to provide this solution is not a matter of the client, how we're looking at, it's about us as a developer or whoever involved with developing such technology, regardless of what you use. As soon as you provide the right solution, then it doesn't matter what kind of buzzword you use as a part of that. And really appreciate that kind of frustration.
Can we take one more question?
Yes, yeah, we need to take one or two questions. Yes,
yeah.
Carel, then Ash.
So, I mean, I love your Digital Nation example, because that's actually what we do anyway. I mean, it shouldn't matter where you're born. It matters more who shares your interests and your ethics and ethos and things like that. So I was thinking, is there some work being done looking at DAOs as potential governance mechanisms for the metaverse to try and stop this kind of corporate capture?
Yeah. So when I first learned about DAOs, I was like, this is great. And then after a while, I was like, oh, this is cute. These people have never been in a volunteer organization before. It is not easy to govern a volunteer-based organization. And that is what a DAO is. So I've been heavily involved in volunteering my entire life. And I look at these DAOs and I look at the challenges that's coming out now, which are social challenges. And you go, oh, that's cute. So there's a voting system that Debian uses. And I would love that to be wider implemented. And so I think that's definitely one of the things that we will eventually use. I've sort of lost faith in DAOs in general because it's a technology overlay that is too heavy, many, many challenges. And the open source community and the volunteering community at large, and this is from the church communities that brought down apartheid, like all of that already exists. Let's learn from those.
Yeah, thanks, Adnan. I think I might have missed this in both the presentations, but if I look at it, and I think as the lady said here, it's essentially technology meeting humankind, and humanity is social by nature. And one of the things that didn't come across to me very clearly, and I think it kind of was creeping in there, and it's based on the issue of trust. And with trust comes the issue of security. I mean, you spoke about taxes as the one thing. How is that trust element built into the application of this kind of technology in servicing humanity? Ultimately, the metaverse is meant to make our lives a lot better, a lot easier, but that basis is trust. But where there's a trust breach, I mean, we know this, you can't trust everybody, but how does one factor in that element of trust into all of this? Thank you.
So honestly, I think that's somewhere where Carel's approach and our approach, or the CSIR's approach and our approach has a lot of joining to do. I feel like there's a lot of potential there. From the volunteering that we do, we talk about public keys exchanges. So if you look at my business card, there's this list of numbers, and you have to meet someone in person. But it's small circles of trust. It's webs of trust. So you trust the people around you, they trust the people around them, and it's called a friend of a friend system. And so eventually you're like, oh, I don't know that person far away, but I trust this person, I trust that person. And, so it's not flawless, it's not faultless, but nothing is. This is life. But I do think there are ways that we can make both of those systems work better, and that is really where I would love collaboration to happen.
I do appreciate that question a lot. We've actually had this debate. Brunel believes there are people in the world that you can't trust. We go out with the point of view that we'd like to eliminate every trust vector that exists, and that you trust no one, and that the protocol or the software that we built works in such a way that you don't have to trust anyone, which is a very unique challenge. And if we can get that right, to me, that's the ultimate solution. So, yeah.
Oh, I've got some insulting words to say. So there's words that I can use for that thinking, but I'll just say the first thing when you look at a project, do you like it? You're going to see who runs it. Because you trust their reputation. So what you're saying doesn't make sense to your own approaches. But again, I think there's a mix. There's some things that we have to rely on trust when we really shouldn't, and there's other things where really trust is part of that relationship.
Any question? Yes, please. There is another session, but we start a little bit late. So.
I think it's a tea break next. Can we tell people that if you don't want to go, you can leave and then we carry on?
Okay, I'll be quick. I'm just going to respond to the question of trust because I've worked in blockchain for quite a long time. So, if you look at the blockchain itself, so it was built on the fact that you don't have to trust anyone, as Carel has alluded, because the problem was that before you have to trust the banks, At times, the banks, can act, in the best interest of customers. Sometimes they cannot act in the best interest of customers. So the problem that was there is that how do we build a payment system that is actually decentralized, no control under the very same jurisdiction, and that is actually sort of like a trustless. So blockchain was actually a system that was actually built to solve that. It uses what you call a decentralized, like a consensus, where the entities that actually reach a consensus about a transaction, they don't need to trust each other. So that's how actually the protocol works.
Yeah, I think, can we have just last two questions, please? Last two questions. I think we can also interact with the speaker during the breaks, or also you can have their contact. But let's have the last two questions.
So speaking on trust and what a fellow member here spoke on. So there was an approach but I think it's mostly academia, to make banks open source. Says that alternate members can create models to solve people's problems. But the issue there was the element of trust. So I haven't really exposed myself in the blockchain theory, but I think it could also be a solution, as the member mentioned. So one of the biggest limitations when it comes to working with trust is that the people that are dealing with the semantics of the models have a challenge in making people trust them, because you can't explain a model to people that solves people's problems because not everyone gets it. So the gap between trust and trusting a model that's used to solve their problems, I think it's a hard case to solve when it comes to that matter, because there's even a saying, all models are wrong, some models are just more useful. So I think that is a gap that we're always going to have. Thank you.
Ibrahim, yes? You would like to comment on it? I believe it's a comment, eh?
Yeah. I think the only thing I can add is open doesn't mean that it's open for everyone to contribute. It just means it's open for them to see. But it doesn't, not everyone will understand that, but at least you can see what's in that code. So it's not hidden. And so, how do you build trust? By being open. So it's a step, but it's a difficult one, yeah.
Thanks. I just wanted to share one thought of mine. So initially, I also doubted blockchain quite a bit, or drastically, until I came across a simple example. I think it was on one of Carel's YouTube videos, where he explains trust. And he says, if he has a piece of chocolate and he needs to share it between two children, let's say he's got two kids, how does each child have the equal part of that chocolate? So how he described it is, he says, one child gets to determine or to cut the chocolate in half, and the other child gets to choose which piece of chocolate he gets to eat. And in that way, the person that's cutting the chocolate knows he has to cut it exactly in half, because if he goes slightly to the right or to the left, the other child's going to get the bigger piece of chocolate. So that's a protocol, and that's the trust in the technology of blockchain, which won me over onto the whole blockchain sphere. Thank you.
Wow. Yeah. There's two alternative ways you can solve that problem. Two alternative protocols, game theoretic protocols. One is you can appoint a dictator, so the mother can decide, can cut the chocolate in half and decide which gets which. And the other is through violence. So the two just fight, and the strongest one gets the chocolate, right? So and that's typically how we used to solve problems in the world, or how we, So, and that's a very, very good example. Thank you, Ibrahim. Is exactly the type of protocols that you're trying to build. Is to build a decentralized protocol, which enforces fairness, and without needing to trust anyone else. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, please go ahead.
Do you need blockchain to get one person to cut the chocolate and the other one to share it?
Yeah.
Why? Why can't you use it with anything else? Because you still need to trust the one kid to not take the knife and stab the other kid and then take the, which I mean is the violence bit, but you still need governance. You still need someone to supervise them that kid is not gonna, and you can do that with blockchain as well, because that's what we're seeing with people hacking billions of dollars in blockchain, in Bitcoin or whatever, and no one says a word. Like,
No, we trust the game theory. We trust the psychology.
you still trust something.
We trust the psychology, yes, and we trust human. we trust human greed. So if we trust that's a very strong assumption in the entire in the protocol is that
So
humans act greedy. Yeah, but so if there's a non-economic actor, if there's someone that has ulterior motives, then that is a
the entire world
weakness.
just runs on economics.
Yeah, I do. Human greed. Yeah.
Remember, we need to design to the worst situation, even if you believe there's perfect outside, but it's not that. But if you need to believe that the system can still help you. Okay, yes, please, short.
Just wait for that. We need it for that.
Okay, so from a complete novice perspective, I'm a complete novice. I'm in health. But now you're quite against the blockchain platform, and it's based on Ethereum, right? Or the backbone, the ethereal backbone. But what else would you then suggest to use?
I'm not against blockchain. I'm against using something when a simpler thing would do. And I'm against going down the road and then use the wrong thing. So I'm just asking, just think. So I'm totally with that there are potential cases that blockchain could work. It's a different, I'm not anti it, I'm just saying, can we please think about this? SafeNet seems to be, so they've got a website, safenet.tech, it's also in the blog. And they use this whole protocol with tokens, but it's not blockchain based. And all their code is there. So it's blockchain, but it's open and it's clean and it's light. So I would suggest go look at SafeNet.
Final comment, please. Final question.
No, it's fine. I will just make a comment on that. I think here about blockchain, metaverse, Web3, Web4, whatever you call it, is many things still in the very beginning. It's very early to judge anything. What must we see technology as a blessing? And for example, blockchain is working perfectly in contract and in also cryptocurrencies. You're against it or not? I mean, every time when something is new, unfortunately, someone is taking advantage of it. And the same with metaverse. I mean, it can be a revolutionized, especially education system, especially banking and e-commerce. Instead of that, we criticize it. Why don't we more focusing on the benefit of it and increase the illiterate technology? To creating an ecosystem to reach out let's say, with ethical way to teach people. Actually, it is not a curse; it's a benefit.
Absolutely,
Thank you.
I agree with you, and I think that's what we're both trying to do. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Highly appreciate it. Well, very interactive session. Thank you so much.
Great.
Okay, just before close, just to highlight that the day is not finished, and there is a lot of also another exciting session. You may check the program and try to attend some of them based on your interest. Please also, during the break, if you can visit the exhibition to see some of the technology within the CSIR, as well as some of the external party also participate. And then I think the CSIR will share with you kind of a link to do a kind of survey. Please, your onboard is critical for us, so we improve and we will take your onboard seriously. So please try to participate in the survey that share with you. Thanks for both of the speaker, and really thanks for the wonderful audience and very interactive. Highly appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you so much.